I think people want to feel like they're invited in. And so I really try to create a voice that sounds familiar.
Welcome to Who's This For? A podcast about creating with intention. I talk with artists, entrepreneurs, and media makers about connecting with their audience by focusing on a single person. You create music, brands, experiences, or stories. This is the podcast for you. Thanks for joining us on the first episode of Who's This For? I'm Scott Morfitt. I don't even fully know what this show is at this moment, but at its core, it's a discussion about intentionality in our messaging and really speaking individually with people and communicating with hearts. It's also just about me talking with some really, really cool people who I'm lucky to meet and who I see communicating extraordinarily across the board and really still doing it with heart and connecting with people. So, my very first guest, welcome to the show, BJ Hollars.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us on this first show. You're really helping me figure this all out in a way. So,
Our collaboration continues.
exactly. For those of you who don't know, which probably a lot don't, BJ and I worked in the past with some of the best writers, actors, and producers I've ever had the privilege of working with. I'm making radio dramas. Gosh, around 5-6 years ago now.
At least. Bend in the River was one of the best creative projects I've ever been a part of. It was so much complexity, 8 episodes. We had a live performance at the end there, you may remember, and it was like knocked the socks off the whole town. It was such a fun thing. I'm so proud of that work.
Oh, yeah. I am too. That live performance was so fun. And that started after we did a couple live radio drama performances.
That's right. Was it War of the Worlds? Was that something you were involved in? Or first
Yeah, War
memory?
of the Worlds was the first one. And that was one before we were actually even doing it as a radio thing. Because I think with the licenses, we couldn't. That was just a live performance.
That's right.
If you're watching or listening to this podcast right now and want to see some more radio dramas, make sure to comment more radio dramas. See, that's intentionality in building engagement with the listener or watcher. And we'll talk about why I tried to avoid plurals when I talk about the audience, because that's very much what this show is about. It's for individuals. It's for people who think individually. And you're very much one of those people. I think the best thing to do at the start of this episode, because it's what I hear other people do, let's hear a little bit about what you've done professionally throughout your career as a writer, teacher, etc. Give me that CV.
Oh, man, I'll give you the short version of the CV for sure. I'm a writer. I'm a professor of English. I teach a lot of rhetoric classes, which is all about knowing your audience and communicating to your audience. And so this is very much on par with that. And I'm also a part-time documentarian. I have a film partner, Steve, and we've completed one documentary on PBS Wisconsin now, and we're working on our second. All-around writerly guy trying to put writing to good use, whether it's through radio drama or podcast or documentary or books or essays or newspaper articles, wherever I could put words down. That's what I try to do.
That's, wow, man of many, many talents. I'm going to ask a bigger question a little bit, so I'll let you think about it. And I'll let the audience think about that it's coming. And the bigger question a little bit is, how do you approach communicating to all those different audiences? But I want to talk to you about first your voice as a writer, because I feel like that's really where, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where a lot of your creativity started, right?
Yeah, very much so. And I was just thinking about this today in kind of preparation of this conversation, because in graduate school, I was all about let's try the unique turn of phrase. Let's try something that's a bit more experimental. And now I feel like I have reversed course 180 degrees. And while I don't necessarily think of an ideal listener or a reader, I absolutely think about an ideal reading experience. And so rather than be a bit esoteric or experimental, I'm all about how do I hook everyone in on their own terms as quickly as possible. So I'm really just trying to find ways to democratize the storytelling process. I want everyone to feel included as viewers and readers and listeners. And so that's kind of been my new trajectory the past 5, 10 years. And I think it works. I mean, I think people want to feel like they're invited in. And so I really try to create a voice that sounds familiar or even folksy. I like to think of myself as like a poor man's Michael Perry, if you're familiar with him, just trying my best to let people feel like they're a part of the conversation, not on the outside.
I love that part of the conversation thing. I think that's so much like broadcast, and I don't always think about that when I write either. With doing these kind of things, we definitely want the audience engaged and in it and watching. I hope you haven't turned off yet, listeners, and you probably haven't because you're hearing this, but that's such a great thing when you're doing that approach is like, and when you're cutting things back, because I've done that a lot as I get older, cutting out mostly cutting out the things I think are cute. Honestly, like
Right.
that's a lot of what I've found as I get older when I'm making stuff. I just cut the like things that I give myself a pat on the back as I'm writing.
Yeah.
How does that change the way you think about the process at the start?
I guess it all depends on kind of what's the medium I'm working in, whether it's a newspaper article or a short film or whatever the heck we're doing. I think the hook is critical no matter what we're doing, whether it's a podcast or an article, like I said, how do we invite people in from the first line? And so I'm just thinking of like a newspaper article I just wrote this week about trying to, kind of connect with my son. He's 13 now. So it's like a whole different form of parenting. And so I kind of open with this metaphor of like, some say that parenting is like a satellite. You got to go through the dark side of the moon before the eventually circle back and you maintain communication again. It's a metaphor I've heard before, but I thought it was like an invitation in because even if you don't know what it's like to parent a 13-year-old, you probably have some sense if you've seen Apollo 13 or whatever, how those satellites go behind the moon, how you lose connection, how you don't quite know what's going on the other end, and then eventually it'll come back. So on a metaphorical level, even if it's not a practical level, you can maybe connect with it. So that was kind of just one example from this week. But again, the larger issue, I think, is just how do you try to tap into someone else's experience or like make some assumptions of what the knowledge set of your listener or viewer or reader might be. Then how do you connect with that?
For me, a lot of, am I making this for a broad audience or a narrow audience?
Yeah.
And in my mind, the broad audience, I still need to connect with on an individual level. Let me get into your professor brain because you teach a lot of classes, and that very much like the act of like teaching a class seems to be like connecting with a room, but connecting with individuals. Do you have anything that how you approach that?
Oh, totally. I got all kinds of tricks in this bag. And so one thing I love to do for this rhetoric class, it's 20 students, they're usually first years. So there's a couple things I do on the first day of class. And one is I kind of ask them each to tell like some strange encounter or experience they've had. The theme is Midwestern strange, so it fits the theme. So we go around the room, they say their name, they say where they're from, and they tell this little strange phenomenon thing. And then so by the end of the class, I make it a point to know everybody's name. Again, it's only 20 names, so it's not like it's impossible. And if they tell me their story, I can usually connect the name with the story so I can pull it off. But I love doing that because you can leave that classroom knowing, holy crap, on day one, my professor remembered my name. And I feel like that builds you a lot of good cachet. The other thing I do in that opening class period is I have this big PowerPoint and I just give you little glimpses of myself. I'll like put in a family photo or I'll mention what I did this summer or just these little clues. I have these things in the syllabus that just don't seem like normal syllabus stuff. I got a poem in there. I got some information about myself. And then at the end, we talk about how everything is rhetoric. And I say, if you think back on this class, think about what I've told you, think about what you've seen on the screen, what photos you've seen. Who do you think I am? And then you realize, oh, wow, all along he's been building this persona of himself that he wants us to understand who he is, that he's a human being. And so like, it's not like a big aha moment, but for whatever reason, it's a big enough aha moment for the first years to be like, all right, I get who this guy is. I know how this is going to work. And I think that really helps us out throughout the term.
Oh yeah, well, that's so cool, dude. Because 'cause you're teaching them that, like, personality still requires a contrivance when you're, like, expressing yourself and when you're trying to communicate.
Absolutely. That's kind of meta, as you said earlier, but I think they love it because it's like that aha moment.
Do you find that, like, when you're doing that kinda stuff, that when the students come in for office hours, they're like, "Hey, you impacted me."
I mean, on my best days, the test for me is I always tell the students at the end of the term, send me a postcard. This summer, if you're going somewhere cool, pick up a postcard. You can just address it to UW Eau Claire English Department. It'll find me. And, a couple times a summer, I'll get these random postcards from random students in random places. And I just love it. So I don't think I'm like, throwing starfish back into the ocean and saving a bunch of lives or anything. But I do think, just by virtue of like with people see me around town, like, hey, Hollars, what's up? Like, they'll take a moment to connect. I love connecting with them. It's just, I have so much pride in watching these people leave the classroom and then go out and do their thing, So, on our best days, yeah, we're making some kind of difference. But at the very least, I want them to know I care about them well beyond the confines of our 15-week class period together.
I've always thought of this about the teaching profession. And really realistically, any age group, but high school and college especially, connecting with someone while they're in the class, but you're building like these just exponential lifelong relationships.
I love it. It's the best reward, It doesn't have to end. I've been able to officiate a former student's wedding. I'm now doing a podcast with the former students. Former students were my babysitters. It's education can feel so transactional, where it's like you pay your money, you get some schooling, you get your grade, but it's also transactional in a more positive sense. And like we're trading ideas and expertise long beyond graduation day. And it's like you get to start as student colleague kind of stuff. And then eventually, if you're lucky, you get to be friends. And that's a really cool thing.
That is. Well, let's transition to talking about making a documentary. I don't need to explain this to you or the listener, but a documentary has video, audios, and story. How did you approach putting all those together?
Well, I want to start by giving you a shout out, Scott, because I was thinking about this and none of this would have happened if it wasn't for a conversation we had at the Plus like 8 years ago, where we're sitting down, we're doing a grant, we're trying to figure out how to pay these voice actors, pay these writers, pay everyone, And I remember saying something kind of naive, like, well, maybe people are just going to like donate their time. And you're like, no, the creative economy relies on people like us to do a little extra labor to make sure that people get paid. And that was such an education for me. I was coming from a place of like, I didn't mind donating my time because I had a paycheck, but that was not true of everyone on our staff, and it was so important. And I carry that to the documentary project, because we, of course, had to pay for music rights and we had to pay for footage and pay my cameraman and pay the editor and pay all kinds of people who helped out with gas and all the stuff, And so budgets were important. Grants were important. Fundraising was important. And you simply cannot make an hour-long documentary under $10,000 on your best day, I don't think, And so if it wasn't for working together to make the money part happen, there would be no story and then there would be no film. And so again, props to you, man, because that was a fundamental kind of like paradigm shift for me that happened at a perfect time.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the things, and I was thinking about this today, I'll probably talk about this in other episodes, but like, I think so often we look at something and we're like, why is this piece of art incomplete? Especially movies, and especially like our current, like so much CGI movies.
Right.
You look at a piece of art and you're like, why? It feels like it's missing something, or they just like made a mistake. Why would someone make a mistake? And a lot of times it's money. It is sheer, just like, they have the money to pay for something?
Yep. There's a lot of shortcuts, a lot of visions that don't come to fruition. I can say that firsthand. So you're always kind of doing the best you can with the resources you got,
How did you funnel those resources into communicating with an audience?
My film partner, Steve Dayton, and I, we started a LLC, Fireside Productions LLC. We've been kind of having this dream of trying to tell a story together. I had more of the director, writing, research skill sets. He, of course, had the film editing skill sets. And so with our powers combined, we thought, let's just give this a shot. So we got a Wisconsin Humanities grant, and that was huge. That was about $10,000, which was the bulk of the money we needed to get this job done. Of course, that's not like going to our bank accounts, but that's going to pay for lighting equipment and rental costs and gas money and all the things that cost money. Music rights, again, are one of the more expensive things. So we were so grateful for that. And then we figured out, okay, how do we afford a voiceover narrator, and we would then take that piece. But that would be a thing, like if you ran out of money, maybe you wouldn't have voiceover narration, and that would be a much worse film, like we needed to have certain things to make it work. So we just had to prioritize kind of how we spent that money. There were a lot of photos we just couldn't purchase the rights to, Thankfully, there's also some local repositories, both the university and Chippewa Valley Museum, that were willing to kind of cut us a break and kind of be a sponsor and help us tell the story with their resources. But if it wasn't for those partnerships, we would have told like a second tier story, just because of the money side of it. So the partnerships helped, the sponsorships helped, and then we had to decide what's the most important thing here. So we always went, video, audio, video. I mean, that's sort of the meat and the heart of the whole project, So thankfully, we could also avoid like a voiceover narration. We afforded most of the music we wanted. That'd be not all of it, but even then, I mean, like having like streaming rights versus TV rights. I mean, it is an education, and they all come with
Yeah.
dramatically more price tags depending on what you want. So we had to be strategic, a bit frugal, but we're really glad it worked out the way it did.
I'm so glad. It's interesting, and we've been framing this discussion correctly. We've talked about what the horse was. I want to hear a little bit about the cart. We haven't talked about what the documentary's about too
That's
much.
right. That's right. All this horse talk. It's called when rubber it's called When Rubber Hit the Road. And yeah, it's streamable right now. It's on PBS Wisconsin. You could also get it on Amazon, other places as well. Basically, it's the story of the 1991 closure of the tire plant here in Eau Claire. So it closed. Somewhere between 12 to 1,500 workers were immediately laid off. It was devastating for our community. It was a huge financial blow. All these blue collar workers, many of whom did not have college degrees, were suddenly tasked to find a new way to make a living. And it was extremely difficult because these were people who had a good living. They were paid well to do hard work, and suddenly that dried up. And now you've got an entire community of workers here in Eau Claire who no longer had jobs, which means the tax funding was dramatically cut, which means the schools went downhill. Like it just had this ripple effect of all these people getting hurt. And so it's a story of not just the pain, but also the way we powered through and how everyone, all the stakeholders got a seat at the table and they had to figure out how do we come back better? How do we bounce back better? And it's just a testament to all the people who kind of left their egos at the door for the most part, from what I'm hearing, to get that job done. And so that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
I love that story. It's having lived in Eau Claire myself, I know it's like it's insanely integral to like the ethos of Eau Claire and what the town is about. Um, I mean, the very nature of like the main town park is Phoenix Park because it's rising from those ashes.
You
I mean,
got it. You got it.
there's still a credit union. I won't say their name because they're not a sponsor yet. But there's still a credit union that's from that very name of that plant. So that's cool. So that's a very interesting story too, because I just know age bracket wise, it would be sort of a story of like, I don't know how old your parents are, and my parents are a full generation older, like, but like it's kind of the story of what would be theoretically our parents' generation.
This is an incredibly personal story for the people of Eau Claire. I guess having not grown up here, I didn't realize just how personal. But the reality is a lot of these tire plant workers felt, I don't know if it was betrayed, but certainly forgotten. They lost their jobs 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. And then people kind of stopped talking about them. Like, yes, there was still the factory, which we know today is Banbury Place, a multi-use structure here in town. But no one really knew what happened to all these tire plant workers. And some moved to different plants, some stuck around town. And so kind of reconnecting with them, giving them their due, really lighting it well, doing a full 2-hour interview, like letting them have their piece was
Yeah.
incredible. But the best part was when we had our premiere, RCU Theater at the Pablo Center last May. We had a standing ovation for all the tire plant employees who were there that night. And there were probably 100 of them, and they were just so proud to find themselves inside this like cathedral to the arts with everyone standing up, applauding them for all they did to help build this city for 75 years. I mean, Eau Claire,
Oh,
as you know, it started out as the sawdust city with the lumber mill. Then it became the rubber city because of the tire plant. And so it was high time they had their due, and it was pretty cool to give it to them.
that's amazing. So when you're approaching telling such a personal story for people, it's interesting because you're almost like a conduit from them to the viewer. I suppose at any time communication, there's a sender and a receiver and a conduit in between. I'm not like reinventing the communication wheel here. What was your goal for the viewer to really take away and feel about it?
It's weird because there's always these dual allegiances, especially in my position, more of a director role. Like my job is building the trust, and really connecting with the community, the tire plant workers, the corporation, everyone involved. I was the guy trying to really build these bridges. And so I always felt some allegiance to all these people. At the same time, of course, it's a dual allegiance because I also have to do right by the viewers, which means
Yeah.
we got to pare down. The full interview can never be there. We're just taking soundbite after soundbite and try to ethically piece it together to tell a full story of, Ken Burns says a documentary is like making maple syrup. You got to get 40 gallons of syrup to make, or sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. And that's how it works for movies. 40 hours of footage, 1 hour of film. And that was exactly it. So much on the cutting room floor. But for me, I kind of, my partner too, we just kept telling ourselves, yes, this is about the people, but it's for the viewers. And so I think that was the distinction. No one was terribly unhappy by the film that we've heard yet. People feel like it was fair-minded. At the same time, I'm sure there were interpretations that the tire workers would have preferred we hit on a little further. It's kind of a union corporation story, so I'm sure both sides wish that we would have maybe sided with one more than the other, but we owed it to the audience to just try to be a neutral arbiter in here. And of course, it's impossible because every sound selection, every image, how long does the image languish, every decision we are making is playing to some heartstring, of course. But at least the information, we were trying to be balanced as possible. And what was so cool is that everyone seemed to kind of respect that. Whether or not they agreed with it, they seemed to respect our attempt.
As you've been playing this on PBS Wisconsin, have you found that the story has found a home beyond Eau Claire?
A little bit. I'm always pushing to push beyond even Wisconsin, because it's really the story of a community struggling in a Rust Belt town who had to find their way forward, which is very much a Midwestern story. And I think we're getting there. One of the coolest pieces of feedback we've gotten was it aired on PBS about 2 weeks ago now. And there's a guy in the film who has a couple lines, and his son reached out and goes, I was watching it and I hadn't heard my dad's voice since he died, and I heard it tonight. It was just really beautiful. There's another one. This one's even better. During the premiere, we have some photos of when the tire plant was converted to become a munitions plant during World War II. All these photos of kind of Rosie the Riveter type women in white garb, kind of doing the munitions stuff. And a woman came up afterward and said, I saw a picture of my mom in those photos tonight. And so again, you never know whose story you're helping to tell fully or what it might mean to someone on the other end.
What is your compendium brought to you for how you approach that next project for that next audience?
It's a great
And
question.
what's on the horizon if you want to share that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough question because as we've talked about, every medium, every project has a different audience, and while we're always working toward that one, you never know the ways in which it will kind of spiral beyond the people you have in mind, the audience you intended for. So lately I've kind of gotten into some weird terrain. I wrote a political book sort of called Wisconsin for Kennedy a few years ago now. And I'm still getting the opportunity to share that book. It's about the 1960 Wisconsin primary, how JFK beat out Hubert Humphrey, went on to win the nomination, the presidency. It's just crazy how a bunch of little-known Wisconsinites banded together to defy the odds and get JFK the win in Wisconsin and eventually help him all the way to the White House. It's a crazy story. And so as a follow-up to that, I'm doing a new one now. I'll be working on it right after we finish talking today. It's about Bobby Kennedy. It's about his brother. So it's all about how this guy changed. Between 1963 and 1968, he went from kind of a brooding, some would say kind of arrogant, selfish kind of guy to following his brother's death. The complete opposite of that. He was so committed to helping people of color. He was so committed to helping poverty-stricken people. And just kind of what prompted this development as a human, this evolution within himself, and kind of the lengths he went to kind of not just change the world for the better, but even question people within his own party. He had this idea called moral courage, which I really love, which just means simply, if you're a Democrat and you don't like what the Democrats are doing, it's your job to stand up and say, look, party, we need to get our act together. And same with Republicans, And so Bobby Kennedy was not afraid to do that. He made some enemies as a result of that. But I'm just really fascinated by a person who can self-reflect and try to make the world better, even if it costs him some cachet, some votes, all the stuff that people are so afraid of losing.
I think time is cyclical for one.
Yep.
Even if we keep having new nice things and algorithms and all of that. But I think every story, and especially this story, just feels really relevant right now. Okay, I'm going to ask you about a dirty secret.
All right.
Are you incorporating AI at all into anything you're doing these days to connect with people?
That's the $1,000,000 question. And it feels so at odds. Why would we turn to a robot to connect with the human,
Right.
And it's doubly frustrating because AI has it's taken all my books without my permission and is now using it to program itself. So that's frustrating. Having said that, I use it in very minor ways. Like I'll use it to fact check. Like I've got a fact I have from a source. I just want confirmation of that. So if I put that fact into ChatGPT, it'll spin out another source. So I can kind of like double check the fact. So I'll do that if I'm doing like a press release or like something. I guess press release is the best example. Sometimes I'll pop the information in a program description, let it do some of the heavy lifting, then I'll go back and tweak. But I would never use it for like writing a book, And I
Right.
mean, I've tried that as an experiment, just like what comes out, and it's shockingly pretty good. It's very scary how good it is. It makes me think I'll be out of a job in no time. But again, the human touch of creating art is so much more and goes so much deeper. I just don't think we can outsource connecting with humans to a robot quite yet. I sure hope humans will stand up to that and say, nope, I want human-made stuff, flaws and all. Because why else are we doing anything? Why are we creating art at all if we're just gonna let a robot do it for us anyway?
Exactly. No, that resonates so deeply. And I like that you're using it really as an assistant almost more than like a creator. That's a lot of
Right.
what I do more or less. It's it's nice as a force multiplier, but then again it's like, "Oh, I probably would have like hired an intern or something for the task I just had AI do."
Oh,
So I don't know
I
what that
know.
means, but
I don't know either. I do know, like, it's so scary in the classroom because students, I mean, it's just right there. It's just begging them to use it. And I've been so fortunate so far. I mean, we won't hold the record yet, but even my first year students, I just like tell them, like, if you need an extension, if you need more time, whatever you need, let me know on the front end and we will make it happen. I can't let you use ChatGPT because it will destroy my soul. And I kid you not, 100% of the people, they'll tough it out, do the right thing. And so far, I've been so fortunate that they've all been willing to kind of take that wild ride with me rather than just like go for the low hanging fruit. Because in the end, of course, not about a grade in the paper, it's about a skill you're going to need one day. And so I think they still
right.
buy that, which is huge.
You nailed that part too. It's at that learning level, and that's my concern about AI. It's
Yeah.
not really about like us as people in our 40s using it. I mean, we've spent 20 years learning how to do stuff.
Right.
So I was about to swear, but I still haven't swore on this podcast. And so this one's still safe for kids. I don't need to learn the boilerplates of writing a contract or something and then filling it in from there. But they might, and they
Yeah.
might need to learn how to think through stuff. I think that's the most dangerous point is not just like that you know how to make prompts and get outputs. That's computer programming. That's,
Hmm.
something we've been doing for 60 years now, but like the real thing is the thought behind it. And yeah,
Oh, it's a brave new world. We'll see. We'll see.
is there anything that you'd really want to tell the listener, the watcher about how to make something for a person?
Wow. It's such a seemingly small question, but it is. It feels very like existential in a lot of ways, at least in the moment in which we're living. For me, everything I consume, whether it's music, whether it's a book, a poem, a movie, I want it to feel like an intimate experience. I think we are all craving connection so much on every level that I want it on every level. I want my songs that way. I want my music that way. I want my plays and movies. I want everything to kind of speak to me and to the experiences I don't understand. There's a great quote that says, literature is a window to look out of and a mirror to reflect back at. And I kind of want everything that I create, everything that I experience to be one of those things. Is it something new that kind of creates new ground for people? Or does it kind of make us reflect on our own experience as human beings? And so when creating, I guess it sounds a little high minded, but I hope that my own work can kind of fill one of those goals. Does it teach something or about the exterior world beyond ourselves? Or does it teach something about our interior lives, about ourselves? And so if it accomplishes either of those things, I feel pretty good about it. So maybe that's one way to try to approach that sort of thing.
I love that. And I apologize because I just thought of that you're really going from the windows to the walls with that.
There you go.
This brain. We'll see how this podcast is received because this is how these episodes are gonna go.
Love it.
Well, BJ, thank you so much. This has been a treat and made me feel like, this is gonna be an awesome ride, and I'm so glad you're the first person on it.
Oh, well, Scott, it's a real honor. It's such a pleasure to reconnect and to see all the work you're doing. And I'm so glad you're bringing some more light into the world.
Oh, thanks, BJ.
Cool. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. And that's it for this episode of Who Is This For? Remember, whether you're creating music, brands, experiences, or stories, it's all about focusing on that one person. I'm Scott Morfitt, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time on Who Is This For?